Well, thanks very much for doing all that you're doing. One thing we can start with, perhaps, in this conversation is the subject of energy efficiency, the question of how you use the energy you've already got. Because, if you look around the world, I walk down Oxford Street in London and the shop doors are open on a cold day. Apparently it's -3 in London today. And the shop doors are open to entice people in, and waves of heat are coming out of them. I mean, that's not efficient. And there are many other bigger things, aren't there, which mean that efficiency is a vital part of what you're trying to do.
I think, first of all, I'm very happy to address this distinguished audience. I think for us here in the Middle East, and especially in the Gulf, we have a long way to achieve what we want to achieve when it comes to efficiency. And the first step before efficiency for us is diversity. So we need really to think about that diversity. And that diversity we started here in Abu Dhabi a few years back when we started this initiative of Masdar, and what you mentioned was the beginning of a new era for us as hydrocarbon producers to move away from hydrocarbon to something that is new. And I think that led us to think differently. So we thought about diversity, and that thinking about diversity led us to think about improving the efficiency.
So explain what you mean by diversity specifically.
Diversity is diversifying from using one source of energy to be open and to invest in other sources of energy and bet on the competition of such forms of energy to balance your equation for the future.
What kind of other sources are you thinking about?
Well, it's not, we passed the thinking. I think we're doing our nuclear program, which is going to contribute to around 24 to 25% of our electricity demand by 2020. And we're expecting 4 plants. Each one is going to contribute, all of them will contribute to around 5,600 megawatt, which is going to be around 25%.
So you see nuclear very much as part of the solution?
Oh, yes.
Now, what do you think about countries like Germany, which have decided, the Germans are dropping their nuclear industry?
Well, it depends what you have. If you started nuclear 30 years ago and you have it, I think the question is, if you compare Germany with UK, for example, you will have a different strategy. So it depends on each country what is the public perception of the forms of energy. And for us here in the Emirates, we addressed this, the public acceptance, and we have a very high level of acceptance that is increasing every year. That doesn't mean that we didn't take some of the serious accidents and capture the learnings from them, like the Fukushima
well, that's
tragedy.
What's frightened so many people, hasn't it? The implications of that.
That's why you need to be very careful when you consider it, where to put it. Is it safe? Are you in a moving or an active tectonic plates belt? Are you in a tsunami or opportunity for tsunami to happen? Are you in the ocean or not? I think if you look at the place for our program Baraka, it's inside the Gulf. It's a very safe place from under the ground and also above the ground risks, and at the same time it's inside the Gulf, so it's protected from the tsunami. And so that is one element of the diversification. The second is our belief in the renewable energy that started with the government, and today we have seen the lowest, I think the lowest in the world, bid on PV solar that was achieved in Dubai, 200 megawatt, at a price of 5.8 US cent per kilowatt hour. That was a dream. No one was even imagining that solar could be that cheap.
Now, is that because the panels are now much more efficient?
Well, it's so many. It's the first of all, it's the belief. So those companies, and we started with around 120 companies bidding on this. So this is not something that only few companies are willing to participate in. I think it's the technology evolution, and the cost of PV is one, but it's not the only one. I think it's the competition among them, it's the viability of that option, and it's the future that they are bidding on building more and more of such projects. So with gas, which is always going to be a major contributor in our system, and having those two to compete with gas and move on a non-subsidized, and this is very important. In the future, we need not to be biased toward any form of those energies if we want to achieve what Europe have achieved, which is a competition, and then whatever is cheaper is going to prevail and is going to last.
Now, your plans and your investments were formulated at a time when the price of oil was rather different to how it is now. And I'd be interested to get your views on the subject of whether, first of all, you think the oil price is going to stay more or less where it is, if you care to talk about that, but also more specifically on what we're discussing. How will lower oil prices affect the U.A.E.'s sustainability program?
Let's not talk about the oil prices, because here in the Emirates and in most of the countries, using liquid hydrocarbon to generate electricity is not viable. And it's not attractive from an environmental point of view unless you have to use it. So let's talk about gas, which is I think the cleanest of the hydrocarbon. If you look at the gas at the current prices, if you are importing gas, you either have a neighbor who have lots of gas and who's willing to give you that gas at a reasonable price, pipeline price, or you buy it as LNG. And I think for us, we're gonna have both. And we have seen that the prices are not that different. And even today, if you look at the pipeline gas you get in Europe, and you compare it with the LNG to Japan, today, they are almost the same, which was not the case 1 year ago. So even at that price, which is, by the way, I doubt that it's going to last for very long, because I'm a believer on a sustainable development in the oil sector, and that sustainable development cannot be achieved in the current prices. So if you even take the gas prices that you have today for LNG, and you compare them with 6 or less than 6 US cent per kilowatt hour, I think you'll figure out that still it's competitive. And I agree with what His Excellency in his opening remarks, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, said that we should not change course because of what happened. First of all, no one guarantees that the oil price is not going to change again in 1 year or two. Those are long-term investments that you do. And I think if there is one learning that we got, and one learning that we would like to share, it's the diversity. Adopt the diversity, start with some percentages, and let them compete in the long run. Because no one can tell you what is the price of renewable 5 years from now. And at the same time, no one can tell you what is the price of gas 10 years or 5 years from now.
But if hydrocarbons are going down in price for people to buy, is there a sense in which making big investments, which may not even benefit the current generation, but would be for the future, is there a sense in which for some places that might seem like an expensive luxury?
To spend on?
To spend on future investment in sustainability, into diversity that you're talking about, long-term investments, when actually for today, you can have bread and jam today for less?
I'm skeptical on the fact that when you make an investment, you don't look at 6 months and you make your investments based on 6 months. You always look on at least a 5 to 10 years span. And if you look at the cost of generation for both, I think you will come to the conclusion that you need both of them. How are they going to, because for us here, we have a growth of at least 6% every year. So the electricity you have today is going to be doubled in the very, very near future with such high rate of growth. 20 years, you're going to see different numbers. So whatever percentages you start with today, that will only dilute unless you replace it and you keep it. And that competition among them, I'll give you an example. Dubai, in their bid, they were bidding for 100 megawatt. When they liked the price, they doubled it. They put 200 megawatt. So, and this is the nature of us as human beings. Whenever the price, and they're comparing it with a risked view of the gas prices. For us here in the United Arab Emirates, we're not biased because we don't have all of the gas we do. We are almost 50% short and we import, and we will be importing in the future. So for us, if you want to look at a real view, we are not biased to our gas, even though we are a hydrocarbon producer. We are biased only toward what makes sense for us and for the generations to come. Yes, we are biased when it comes to protecting the environment because we care, and I think this is a legacy and a heritage that we got from His Highness late Sheikh Zayed, the founder of the nation. He was very concerned. He was pushing us to be concerned about the environment. Many initiatives in the petroleum sector, for example, such as cutting the flaring, was his push. Mm-hmm. So by nature, we will be leaning toward the more environmentally viable solutions if the differential is small. And I think today I can see that differential is there. They can compete without support.
Now, you're very forward thinking on this, but not, of course, everyone in the world is. And on this is a small detail perhaps it's symptomatic of people's attitudes. I noticed that this week, or this month, at the Detroit Motor Show, the most popular cars there, I saw in the Majlis a remarkable display of electric cars being wheeled through, which are, increasing in their progress. But at the Detroit Motor Show, gas guzzlers are back in. The big American engines. People are thinking now in the United States, very big economy, they're thinking, well, everything's fine now. We've got more oil. We can get back to where we really want to be. And so, because a lot of sustainability in countries depends as well on the will of the people, doesn't it, towards seeing their money going in that direction. Particularly in Europe and the US.
I'm still responsible for the oil, so I will be biased toward the oil as well. I think we need to be realistic on the hope as well. And in the transportation sector, I think it will need time. But in the power generation sector, I think it's imminent now. It's taking more market share. But when you're talking about the future of the transportation, I think it will take long time for people to let go of their cars, and switch to electrical vehicles, and I think they'll compete with each other, and it depends on what are the prices and all of that. But you will always find some people like it's a preference, and again, I don't want to push people toward the selection because then you are biased. Likewise, if you want to be biased and introduce lots of taxes and force people to one form of energy, then it's exactly the same if you are biased toward and subsidizing the cost of or the gas prices and giving it to the power generation. I think in the future, we need to be wise in our choices. We need to let the market decide on what is viable. Carbon, I understand, and we in the United Arab Emirates have put a target to reduce the carbon footprint per capita, to reduce it per capita. And I think that should be encouraged in the power generation. If we shift in the power generation where it makes sense today, then I think we will be taking a leap in the region if we do that. It will take us a long time to do it, but I think transportation will take time.
And just to wrap up, Your Excellency, are you feeling optimistic about the way that this is going to go, bearing in mind that the world at the moment seems to be more full of political uncertainties, difficulties, fair share of economic problems as well, and huge challenges? Do you think, bearing in mind that greater environment, that the sort of things that you're trying to do here might also be taken up more by people in other countries?
No, I am optimistic, and we're not just watching the world going crazy. I think there are always good people. There are bad people who are doing things bad, and there are always good people who are trying to be balanced, trying to help other nations. And I think some of the examples or the contributions, small contributions that we have done, and other neighboring nations have done as well, is to promote the use of cleaner forms of energy whenever we can, and promote the R&D, promote those young kids who came today shaking hands with leaders and politicians and sitting next to Al Gore. And I think that kind of recognition to those new generation who are the hope of future is what's going to make a change. It's not us who are going to make the change, it's them who are going to make the change. If they are hopeful, then the world is going to be a better place. If we kill the hope on those people by not helping them as much as we can and building ideas, trying to solve their problems, I think the world is going to be a rather doomed place.
Well, let's hope it works out the way that you want it to. Thank you very much, sir.